Good morning, everyone. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us this morning. My name is Doug Smith. I am a senior consultant here with Infinity Network Solutions, one of your presenters today. Mick Williams is also here with me.
Mick, I'm good. Glad to be here with you, Doug.
Yes, he's also a senior consultant here with Infinity Network Solutions. And one of the things that we want to talk about today is what the risks of an employee are in the modern office, what risks from having employees in the modern office brings to you. So to kick that off, in today's office environment, technology is an essential part of almost every task. Everything you do touches technology. I mean, for goodness sake, my refrigerator is connected to the internet now. So technology in most businesses is an integral part. Likewise, your employees are an integral part of your business, and they are the ones using that technology. And because of that, your employees bring a certain level of risk to your company. And that's one of the things we want to talk about today is, what those employees are doing with your technology, what people are doing to your employees with technology, and how that brings risk into your environment. We want to go ahead and talk about the inherent risk in all of that. So just to kick it off, I'm going to Okay. I want to make sure everybody's hearing me now. Somehow or another we got muted there. I apologize for that. Just covering this real quick. Some of the things we're going to talk about today is bring your own device, what that means as far as employees using their own devices on your network. Social engineering, what social engineering looks like and how it can affect your employees. Malicious intentions and sabotage. What happens when somebody purposely wants to do your company and your data harm? Misuse of technology, employees doing things with your software that they shouldn't, things of that sort. And of course, the tech savvy employees and how those employees impact your business, not only from a positive standpoint, as well.
Okay, Doug, I'm gonna go ahead and cover a little more in depth on the bring your own device. What are the risks whenever you allow employees to bring their own device, their own laptop, their own cell phone, and their own iPads and things like that? So the first major risk is you don't own that device. So you don't own that device. So your data is on a device that is not owned and protected by you. Your data will be on a device that you don't own, and it leaves your premises. So you won't be able to control where your data goes. Retrieving your data if the employee is terminated. What happens when your employee terminates, or whether they leave or you leave them? What is your process? These devices can have infections. They can have malware installed on them, and you're allowing them to have your data on them and also connect to your internal infrastructure. That is something that you have to cover and make sure it's protected against. And data leakage. It's really important that you control the perimeter of your data and where it goes and how it gets and where it ends up. When we talk about data leakage, is the unintentional leakage of data to, say, social media sites, or if an employee lets a family member or a friend use their device and your data is on there and they're able to see it.
So if I had an employee that was wishing one of our patients, if I was a doctor's office, congratulations on the birth of their daughter, that would probably be inappropriate.
That'd be a HIPAA violation.
Okay.
So that is exactly right. So you're right on target there. So what are the benefits of allowing employees to bring their own device to your environment? First of all, it's a lower cost for you. You're not having to cash outlay 20, 50, 100 devices for your employees to use. And quite honestly, everyone already has a device, so they're carrying 2 devices, and it would be that they could lose it or anything like that. That more damage could happen with multiple devices. Higher productivity is a benefit. Number one, they're only managing 1 device, so they're not having to keep up with 2 devices, their own and then the company's. Generational acceptance is a good point. As we all know, we've read in the papers, we hear in the news about millennials, and that they have their own device and they have their own belief. It's the brand of the device is very important to the younger generations, whether they love the iPhone, whether they love Android, whether or not they love the Windows phone. It's important that they actually feel at home and it'll create higher productivity for them. Steps that you can take to protect your company from a BYOD environment. First thing is create a clear company use policy. That's very important, and it should follow right in line with your information security program and policy.
So let me ask you a question, if you don't mind.
Sure, Dave.
So what would a sample policy for a client who's trying to really get ahead of this and be able to allow their employees to bring devices to work look like? So maybe like a cell phone or something.
Well, the information security program and policy is a good starting point, but that's whenever you get the BYOD policy in place, it does a little bit further about what's expected of the employee and what's required of the employee. First thing that you would do is you make sure that the device that they use with your data on it locks, and make sure that it's got a good password, make sure you use it in fingerprint scanners, things like that, retinal scan. I think the newest iPhone has the facial recognition. Make sure that's implemented and make sure it's required. Make sure that the device is encrypted. The data that's on the device should be encrypted at all times. Make sure it is password protected. Make sure that that you can remote wipe it. Make sure that if the employee goes rogue and leaves and doesn't have you don't have that device in hand or even in your premises any longer, make sure you can actually remotely wipe that device.
And how would we do that?
We would use endpoint protection and institute mobile device management, and that would allow you to actually remote wipe it without their knowing. Of course, make sure that's in the policy and the agreement that you have with the employee, because you don't want to cross any boundaries of the legal liability for yourself.
So the policy would say something that would say, hey, we're allowing you to use your device, but you're allowing us to remote wipe it should you leave the company and not let us remove our data, or should it get stolen.
Correct. And that would be a communication moment for you and the employee at the very beginning, not in the middle or at the end.
Or just when we're about to wipe it.
Exactly. Yeah, they should know up front what's going to happen to them.
Okay, so I'm going to take over again real quick and talk a little bit about social engineering and what exactly that is. Social engineering is the act of someone externally trying to manipulate you or your employees to gain information or to compromise your systems. So as we get into that, I want to look at a few common types of social engineering and things you may know or you may not know. One of those is phishing. Phishing attempts are things that generally come in email form. More recently, you're starting to see them in social media apps and in text messages and things like that. But the basic premise is that someone is trying to get information out of you. They're sending you an email asking you to click a link. You've probably all heard the ones about where your Bank America account has been compromised. You have to click this link to validate your password, and they want you to enter your password. Or you get an email from Discover Card saying you need to check your account. Please click this link. The whole purpose is to gain access to information about yourself. Yeah, they may be wanting to get your passwords. They may be wanting to get social security numbers. It may be something as simple as a way to open a back door into your machine. Some of these attempts can be very specific. They can be targeted specifically to the CEO of your company. A way of whaling where they're going after the big fish in your environment. Or they can be an email from your CEO to you, somehow spoofing his email address to make you think it's from that person or her or her, and having you click on links. The whole object is to make you do something, make you make a call, make you click a link, make you give up information. Trojan media is another way. I think probably everyone's had that marketing call from XYZ company where Bob has got some great product he's wanting to sell you, and he is willing to send you a CD for you to view on your computer as a demo. And all you got to do is, accept, and he's going to send it to you. He's setting you up to be ready to receive the CD. Well, that CD may be a legitimate marketing piece of material, or it may be something that's loading a malicious program into your computer. It's very common for social engineering attempts to call you ahead of time to kind of prep you to receive malicious content, so that without knowing, you actually put the CD in, you run the program, and now you're compromised. Dropping a flash drive in a parking lot. People will, just because of the nature of people wanting to help, will pick up a flash drive and go inside and try to figure out who it belongs to. If they can't find it, they may plug it into their computer and try to find out what kind of content's on it so that they could identify the owner. Very common. Content from websites, websites that you're not used to going to, or that have pop-ups that are asking you questions. These are all ways of social engineering you, getting you to do something that gives them access. One of the more recent inactions of social engineering is what we refer to as fake support calls, or caller ID spoofing. And what this is where a person that is trying to get information from you is actually going to fake a phone number. So when they call you, it looks like they're calling from the FBI or from Microsoft. We're all pretty tech savvy as a society now, so it's real easy for us to go to Google and look up a phone number. So if you've got a caller ID coming and you go to Google and it says it's the FBI, you're more apt to actually listen to the person on the phone, because they're socially engineering you with fake information. Same thing. Go ahead, Mitch.
So what you're saying is, if I get an email or a phone call from someone that says they're from Microsoft and my device is creating a problem on the network and they're willing to connect to me for free and work on it, that's a piece of social engineering I need to be very wary of.
It is, and being aware of it is really the biggest piece. Knowing how to identify it, knowing how to. In general, Microsoft's not going to reach out to you directly for something like that. Just like the IRS is not going to call you to tell you you have to pay your taxes on the phone. Even if you're not sure, there's usually telltale signs in the process of these kind of calls. Like the only way to pay us is through Apple gift cards, to be able to get the payment here in time. Well, that's a big red flag for most people, not to pay people if they call you. You should always be able to return a call. And the thing is, with social engineering attempts like this, returning a call is a good way to kind of thwart the effort, because even though they're spoofing the number, they can't receive calls to that number. Clickbait and pop-ups. These are the things we mentioned a moment ago, like pop-ups when you go to a website that are, that possibly are telling you something's wrong with your computer, or clickbait, Vin Diesel dies in social media, click this to find out additional information. A lot of these are trying to get you to go to some site or some other additional social engineering attempt to get additional information out of you. Fake alerts, scareware, and ransomware are also another way. The little box that pops up when you're on a website that says your computer is infected, click OK to initiate a scan. Well, the button might as well say, instead of OK, remove all my protection and infect my computer. The goal is by making you click on something, they can run their program to disable it. Your antivirus will protect you in a lot of those cases unless you override it by clicking OK. So what are the risks to you as a company? Well, potentially a malicious person trying to access you through social engineering can have a back door open to your system, whether that be for hacking, for gathering information, for compromising data, for stealing your company secrets. Your confidential information could be compromised if it's something as simple as trying to steal your identity, social security numbers, date of birth. For example, if you're on Facebook and you get that link that says Vin Diesel died, and you want to click on the link to see what happened, and it prompts you and says, hey, to read this article, you have to join this website with Facebook. And you're like, well, okay, I'll just go ahead and join with Facebook. Well, now that website has access to all your data on Facebook, and they have your, name, your date of birth, any other personal information you have, including perhaps address and things of that sort, usually enough to compromise your identity. They could certainly grab your financial information, stored credit card numbers, put a keylogger on your system so that they can monitor when you're on your bank website and get your access to your bank accounts, capture credit card numbers, things of that sort. And of course, a lot of times it may be something more direct, more focused on you, and your trade secrets may be something that they're after. That secret formula for your, Kentucky Fried Chicken that makes it so important to your company staying in business. Last and probably not least, probably one of the more, is your reputation. If your contact list, for example, is compromised, and now every business associate that you interact with is getting an email from you demanding that you pay them and open this invoice, and when they open the invoice, it infects their computer with ransomware, that's going to mess with your reputation. If you're a compliant company, such as one that has to comply with HIPAA, and you actually have a situation like that constitutes a breach, you have to report it. And HIPAA actually has what they call a wall of shame, where all published breaches are set for public notice. So these are things that can drastically impact your ability to conduct business in your environment because of your reputation. Yes, Mick.
So what you're saying is, if I'm a company and I'm regulated by the FFIEC or by HIPAA guidelines, and I have a social engineering breach or a data breach, I have to notify?
Yeah, there are notification rules. Now, it's specific to what regulatory agency that you fall under, so the rules will differ. But just about all of them have some kind of notification rule where if the breach impacts more than a certain number of clients or a certain number of people, then you have to make a notification publicly.
Thank you.
So what are the benefits of social engineering? Well, when we were putting this program together, I thought long and hard about the benefits of social engineering, and I came up with this very exhaustive list of things that you can benefit from social engineering. There are absolutely none. There is nothing that you benefit from somebody trying to manipulate you or your people to gain access to your systems. So how do you protect yourself? If there's no benefit to you, how do you protect yourself? Well, training is probably the first thing that you can do, and probably the most important thing you can do. Teaching your employees and your staff and yourself how to recognize different social engineering attempts can drastically reduce the odds that you're going to be impacted by that. One of the best ways that ransomware actually gets through and propagates in the world today is through social engineering, some way to get you to click on something. Of course, we have programs where we can, help you do social engineering training, where we can actually send out emails to you and your staff that train you how to recognize phishing attempts. They're fake. They look like phishing attempts. If your employees click on them, we let them know, hey, you clicked on this, you shouldn't have, here's why. And you can see a progression over time on how they actually get better and learn how to avoid things like that. Defense in depth. When we talk about protecting your network from a security standpoint, one of the things that we always talk about is defense in depth. And what this means is there's no one thing that's going to protect you, so always have more than one item. So like for phishing attempts, have spam filtering enabled so that you're filtering out known spam attempts and known malicious content from your emails. Have good antivirus protection in place, so should something get through, it's another place that it can be stopped. Make sure that you've got a good training program in place so your employees are able to it. Ensure you got a good firewall that's blocking content from countries you don't do business with, so that if there is malicious content that gets through, the links don't work because they go to places that you're already blocking. Backups for just about anything that you can tell me you have a problem for, I'm going to say backups is a part of that solution just because it's that important. Backups are your way to recover should something go wrong. You always plan, you train, you work to try to avoid issues. But when they happen, you have to have a way to recover, and backups is that way to recover. And then, of course, lastly, again, not leastly, is training. It's one of those things that I purposely put on the list twice because it is that important. We do have programs that can help with that. They can actually work with the training, but making sure your employees and yourself are properly equipped is the best thing. Yes, Mick.
So let me, since you emphasize training so well, so what we can kind of derive from this is this new employees is the major risk?
Well, actually, there's no specific employee group that's at risk more or less. Phishing attempts, social engineering attempts are getting so sophisticated now that they'll actually gather specific information on a particular employee and be able to customize the attempt specific to that employee. So in doing so, that puts anybody at risk. That puts, even the CEO of the company at risk who, started and founded it. So it's best to train everybody as a whole, not think, well, I just need to train my employees, but also have ones where you go through the training as well. So.
All right. Well, I'm going to talk about malicious intent and sabotage, which would be the result of social engineering and some of these things.
Yeah.
What is a malicious intent and sabotage? Well, it would be your internal infrastructure and people that would cause you damage to your files and data, and then are intent on doing that. It is those inside your organization that are intent on stealing the data for personal gain or for whatever cause. It could be from those inside your organization intent on damaging your reputation, whether it's a disgruntled employee or someone who doesn't feel like they got the raise they should have received. Those inside your organization wishing to use information for extortion. That goes to the personal gain, but quite honestly, it could be for even more than just personal income. It could be for reputation. It could be for fun and that kind of thing. So what are the risks associated with malicious intent and sabotage? Client data is compromised and misused. As a business owner and as a client, your client's data is your responsibility to protect. So you're required by many reasons, whether it be regulatory or just good business practices, to make sure that data is taken care of. Company data is lost, compromised, and misused. Failure to comply with regulations. We mentioned earlier in the presentation about HIPAA. It has teeth, and as well as Gramm-Leach-Bliley and Sarbanes-Oxley, they all have teeth. As an organization, if you are found guilty of not protecting the customer data well, it can be very expensive, and quite honestly, it can be so expensive it could cause business failure completely.
Well, one of the things that a lot of people don't understand, I apologize for interrupting, is that a lot of times what your employees do that you may not be aware of may be putting you at risk. That employee who took a copy of your Office home and has now put you in violation of Microsoft's licensing. The BSA can fine you up to $10,000 per incident. Now you're probably thinking, well, that's $10,000 for them taking a copy of Office home. Well, not exactly. Office contains 7 specific individual products. So Microsoft sees that as 7 specific violations of their license. So now you're looking at a $70,000 violation because somebody took, something home. Or when you're talking about compliance, it's very easy for a incident to run into the hundreds of thousands when you're talking HIPAA or FFIC.
So that can be a business center.
It can very well be a business center. In fact, a lot of companies don't have the capacity to recover from such large fines when they do occur.
So what steps can we do to protect your company? What can you do to protect your company? First of all, you want to grant only the security needed per user. If just because a user says it would be more convenient to have a bring your own device or have access to data, make sure their need is necessary to give that security. You should restrict your users to only to their need. Endpoint security is a great point for your bring your own device and for your PCs.
Now, what kind of things would you suggest like that? I mean, I know you're talking specifically about your mobile device management, right?
Correct. That way, if you have good mobile device management, you can, like we had originally said, you can remote wipe it if the employee goes rogue, things like that. You know, a couple of products that you would recommend, Doug?
Yeah, actually, Mass 360 is a product that we recommend and to our clients, and it does give that ability. It also gives the ability to encrypt the device, lock it, provide a timeout on use. So it gives you a lot of that control. And if it's a company device you're trying to lock down, you can actually restrict it to specific apps that the employee can use.
Excellent, thank you. Data loss prevention software.
Yeah, even some of the tools that you just spoke of, like the Mass 360, does give you that ability as well. And data loss prevention is kind of a broad term. It's one of those kind of things that means a lot of different things, but in its most simplest form, you're trying to identify what data is important to you and prevent employees from emailing it off or saving it to their device or things of that sort that'll basically take it out of your control.
Thanks, Doug. The physical data destruction, we're going to take a step away from the mobile device and from the PC and from the endpoint. Let's talk a little bit about physical data. Everyone prints data. Everyone has hard drives, physical hard drives, CDs, thumb drives, different ways that make backups and carry home or carry to a safe deposit box. That device, that printout, that hardware has to be destroyed properly and taken care of properly at the end of its life cycle. When you want to get rid of a PC that's in a HIPAA controlled environment, you can't just take the hard drive out and throw it in the trash. You actually have to run software that completely erases everything properly that the Department of Defense has approved. And also it should be shredded in a facility to take care of it for HIPAA, and you have to have a documented destruction. So it's really important for printouts and documents. You want to use a cross-cut shredder. Just a regular shredder that doesn't do crosscut is not acceptable by any of the regulatory agencies.
So if a company wants to say when they replace a computer for an employee, let their employee have their old computer, is there a way for them to do that, or is that just a bad idea?
I think it's just a bad idea. You know, there are ways around it, but the problem with that is getting people to follow the exact policies and actually documenting it properly. Okay. If you're a regulated environment, you have to be able to document every piece of that. That
hard drive is the most important piece to be destroyed. No matter what happens, you would still have to destroy the hard drive.
Definitely.
Okay.
Definitely.
So let's talk a little bit about the misuse of technology and what that is. Misuse of technology is using company technology for unauthorized personal use, using company technology for personal gain, and using company software for personal use outside of license. When we're talking about unauthorized personal use, that's kind of that taking that copy of Office Home that I was talking about earlier. Doing things like, you know, your employer has AutoCAD and you want to use AutoCAD at home, and you're going to, you know, take that license home. This obviously is not the way that's intended. Now, there are licenses on different softwares that do allow for multiple seats. So it's very important to know your software, to know the technology that you're using. You know, same thing with hardened technology in your office, like a copy machine. You know, printing out your church bulletins without company approval is not a good use of the company technology. So there's all kind of ways where technology can be misused. Using the internet as well, company provided internet for illegal purposes. I've seen companies where, you know, employees were using internet for illegal purposes that put the company at risk. Where when the police or GBI or someone comes in to arrest the person because they were using the technology of the company, well, all that technology now becomes evidence and gets impounded. So these are things to consider when you're talking about misuse of technology.
Yeah, I just want to add a little bit about that. If you are a regulated environment that's under the FFIEC guidelines, which would be banking, financial, and also under HIPAA, which would be medical, there is a specific part about gambling, online gambling, illegal gambling. It actually may be legal in some areas of the country, but if you have protected data from your clients, it is completely and strictly prohibited in case
Exactly.
in case the employee is not an
So,
order.
so an employee who thought that on their lunch break, they're going to go to their favorite poker site and play some Texas Hold'em may very well actually be breaking the law.
And you will be responsible for it.
Absolutely. So you want to define these kind of things, not only in your policies, but also to training, in your training for your employees as well. So when we're talking about these sort of things, what are the risks? Even though we kind of dipped into that just a little bit, obviously, loss of data. Any kind of misuse of technology can potentially be misuse of your data as well. You have that secret formula. Bob takes it home and starts selling it on the internet for $5 a pop. That data could be lost. You could potentially have something where you've infected a system and it's encrypted now from a ransomware or something like that. Without proper backups, that data could be lost. Like you were mentioning, criminal liabilities. The actual liability of the act may reside with the individual, but the devices and everything else may very well fall to the employer. Civil lawsuits. Lawsuits because the technology that you provided enabled somebody to do something they wouldn't have otherwise. Are your employees taking their technology home to do work on the side? I mean, are they using the tools that you've issued them to go to someone else's place of business and do work?
Some of the lawsuits I read about when Microsoft is audited in a business and found that they're misusing copyrighted materials and their employees are carrying it home and they're actually profiting from it.
Yes, and it goes both ways. You have that new employee that comes in and they have a newer version of Office that they got from their previous employer illegally, and now they're installing it on all your computers, and
now I'm liable.
Now you're liable. And then, like we said before, that's per office suite per computer. You got 10 computers, that's closing in on $1 million fine. So
yeah, that's a business ender.
Yeah, that's a business ender. Or if they're taking your stuff and working somewhere else, if they've got your technology and your company branded equipment in your car and they're doing work off site, they're effectively representing you, whether they're getting paid directly or not. Loss of revenue. Obviously, any of this can be a loss of revenue just because of the fact that, whenever you're misusing something, you're not using it to its full potential, but you're also placing at risk your reputation, which can cost you clients, which can cost you loss of revenue. You're placing at risk the potential for fines, which is a loss in revenue. So there's multiple avenues here for loss of revenue. And then ultimately, if the loss of revenue is great enough or the fines are great enough, loss of business can occur, which is obviously something we want to avoid and help make sure that that risk is mitigated. So what steps can we take to protect your company in instances like this? Well, one of the things that Mick mentioned earlier when we were talking about malicious intent was the grant only the security needed per user. There is no reason that the person who's answering the phones needs access to your books, your QuickBooks, your Mass90, whatever your financial program is. So your network security should be restricted in such a way as to prevent that user from gaining access.
But I understand that that's important that we restrict usage to only needed on that basis. What's the best way to handle that? I know a little bit about PCs. Was what I hear a lot, and it is so expensive for a company to come in and do it. But is it worth it?
I think it is. I think you get what you pay for. You need someone who truly understands how network security works, and somebody that's good with PCs, may be able to help you navigate Facebook or fix your printer, but they're not going to understand how to properly secure. It is very common for companies to grow over time, and as such, they kind of implement things as they go. Somebody should routinely, at least annually, be doing a review of your technology security and how you're using it, and making sure that it's applied appropriately, that the people you want to have access to things have access, and the people you don't.
So what you're saying is, if I have a dental practice and my nephew is handling everything for me, but he really doesn't understand HIPAA, he's putting me at a great risk for
He's
my
putting you at
business.
he's putting you at a great risk. I know someone, my brother's cousin's next door's neighbor's third sister, so always have a trained professional that's there to do your security review and make sure that you are only granting access to those things needed. Training and education is another key point too. A lot of times people just don't know, and you don't know what you don't know. So training your people to understand how the licensing work, what's appropriate. A lot of, especially the younger generation now, have been raised on an internet that thinks everything is free. We probably all know about Napster, but a lot of them share. That's one of the original file sharing utilities. It's long since gone, but the point is that a lot of the youth think that sharing files, sharing music, sharing documents is okay, even if it's in violation of the copyright, because no one's taken the time to teach this to them. So when they come into your environment in a business sense, they kind of bring that perception with them. So making sure you train all your employees to understand copyrights and licensing, and to understand how to make sure they are conforming to those is very important. Comprehensive information security plan. We talked about the annual review, but the annual review should be a review of how you are actually aligning with your security plan. Take the time to decide who needs access, how they're going to be grouped together. What is the policy you have for when an employee leaves? How do we make sure they're removed? Actually take the time to have a comprehensive information security plan that addresses these. Obviously, this is one of the things that you and I do on a weekly basis with our clients as our role as senior consultants here. But whether you have a senior consultant or not, you want to make sure that you have a security plan. Properly vet potential employees. A lot of this can go just by making sure you have good hiring practices. You want to do enough background, make sure you understand and vet employees properly. It's very easy. I think most companies nowadays are doing credit checks and background checks as a potential employee as a routine basis. But usually hiring the right people is a great way to make sure that you're just not getting the malicious and misuse of technology in there. So. I have a question here that says, do you do security education specific to my business? We do security education in general. We have several mechanisms for that. We have a program where we offer online training that offers some of that. And then we also do in-person sessions where we'll come to the office and speak to your staff or groups and speak to specific topics and security topics regarding educating your staff. Depending on your industry, we can tailor that to be more specific or less specific as you need. Obviously, if you're a client, we can be much more specific and tailor it specific to your business than we could if you're not a client, because being a client, we would have gone through the assessment process and know more about your business to educate your staff appropriately. Does that answer your question? Okay, we'll go ahead and go on. Nick, I'll hand it back over to you.
I think whenever you're talking about properly vetting employees, kind of segues us into the next slides. Tech savvy employees. What are they? What is a tech savvy employee? The younger generation using technology, they're using technology at much younger ages. I've got a granddaughter that can use an iPhone better than I can, and that's a sad state of affairs. I've been in IT for 30-something years. But she just picks it right up and does what she wants to, watches YouTube, learns how to crochet, learns how to do things. She's 7. That example leads us into discussing the employees that we're hiring. If you hire a much younger person that's been using technology, if they're 25 years old, they've been using it for 20 years. They've got 20 years experience with technology. So it's important to know what the risks are associated with our tech savvy employees, because more than likely they know more than the owners of the businesses. Some of the examples are script kiddies. They're users that would use Google and YouTube to do a task beyond what their skill set is. If you tell them to go do something, or if you give them a task, or if it's something on their agenda, they're likely not to ask you your process. They will more than likely pull it up on YouTube or on Google and find their own way. The only problem with that is it may not fall into the line with your policy and processes that you have approved for them to do.
Or potentially may violate some kind of compliance regulation.
Exactly. Employees that use unapproved practices in software because that's what they know. So many times I've heard the horror stories that they hired a new employee, and it really doesn't have to do with age, but we'll go with the younger crowd because they're more inclined to do it.
And they're easier to pick on.
That's right, exactly. So what we have is you have guys that are coming in, ladies that are coming in that have been using a particular piece of software. It may be freeware, it may be anything that they've come up with that they've enjoyed to using over the years and it's made them very productive. Except it's not approved by your vendor management process. It hasn't been vetted properly. It's not documented properly. It may actually not follow the regulations and the regulatory requirements that you are required to. So it's important that you control your stuff.
Well, I actually have an example of that. I've seen a client before that used Visio for all their technical drawings. The entire company used that. They hired a new person. The new person came on, did not know Visio, did not want to learn Visio, but they knew another program. So they loaded a piece of bootleg software and they ran all of their projects under this program. Well, the person didn't last. They ended up getting fired. But all their project work and everything they had was in a program that nobody else knew, and nobody else knew how to had a program to access it. So everything was completely inaccessible to everyone else. They ended up having to buy another piece of software at quite an expense just to be able to open the other person's files.
So basically, they carried the company into a business continuity planning failure.
They did.
Very interesting. So what are the risks with hiring a tech savvy employee? Although it seems like every time I've spoken and with an employer, a particular group of people, it's always we need to hire more computer tech savvy people to work for us instead of really looking for the person that's more qualified for their business. You can always train PC. You can always train a doctor. And so you got to make sure you've got the right people in place. And just because they're tech savvy doesn't mean it's the best way. But what are their risks? They could possibly undermine your current process, kind of like the last thing that Doug and I were just discussing about business continuity planning failure, because they used something that wasn't approved and it wasn't documented in the business continuity plan and they left. So, I mean, that's just one small example, but there are so many others. Failure to follow company policy. Whenever they come in, they see things with a different lens. They will see things their way, and they say, "Well, my way is better. I've got a better piece of software. I've got a better process for this, so I'm just going to do it my way." But the problem is, it'll violate company policy and could possibly violate the law in turn doing that. Unauthorized deployment of software and devices. We kind of mentioned that earlier when we're talking about someone coming in with their own piece of software, but if they come in and they like their software package, they may deploy it, and it may require a license to do that, in which case you're breaking the law and you have to.
I got a great example of that. I know of a company that had a very strict policy against wireless. They did not have wireless in their organization. It was a financial institution, and they didn't have it for a reason because of security and stuff like that. And an employee decided they didn't like that. They wanted to be able to use wireless. So they brought a wireless device at their at the local home, Walmart, and brought it in and plugged it in. It was a home device, and they didn't secure it. And suddenly now there's this wireless device working on a network that should have never been there. The company at the time did not have the mechanisms to detect that had been added, and ultimately somebody compromised their network and got financial data because of the fact that an employee brought in a device from Walmart to make sure they had wireless.
So what you're saying is, I think we call that a rogue AP.
Yes, sir.
If I were sitting outside of the business in the parking lot with my laptop, could I have stolen their data?
You could absolutely have. In fact, you could have come by there at midnight when nobody else was there and nobody saw you and sat there as long as you wanted and get as much data as you needed.
The risk is high. Let's see. Confidentiality violations and with posts to social media. Gramm-Leach-Bliley, Sarbanes-Oxley, HIPAA, the list is long, but the requirements of the employees are that they protect the data by law. And so these tech-savvy employees, they're on social media, they're on everything, LinkedIn, Facebook, you name it, they're there. So they may not even intentionally do it, but if they're on and they say, well, I just saw and a patient's name in the bank or in the doctor's office or the dental office, and they're doing really good since their heart surgery. They just violated the law, and that could certainly open and potentially cause regulation violations for the business that they're working for.
So what I hear you saying is that it's not necessarily bad to have a tech savvy employee. In fact, they could probably be beneficial to your company, but it really kind of goes back to training, making sure that they're properly trained, that they understand your policies and procedures correctly, and that you're properly restricting them where you can.
Very much so. What steps can you take to protect the company? First of all, it's really good to have a clear definition of responsibilities and processes. The normal job description that says other duties not assigned is not a good thing to go for whenever you've got tech savvy employees that are going to stretch the boundaries of your policy. You want to make sure it's pretty concise and they're defined what their responsibilities in the process is. Periodically audit your environment. No matter what you think, always audit your environment. You may be surprised at what you find. If you don't have the qualifications or anything to audit that environment, Infinity, of course, has plenty of technology savvy employees that can come take a look at it.
Good savvy employees.
Yeah, Doug and I do that on a weekly basis with our clients. We look at the environment and try to keep everybody.
And that's part of that annual audit process that we talked about earlier.
Proper network and security management, having a good information security program and PC policy, and hiring the right people and vetting the people. Everything is a piece of the puzzle, but your security management is a layered approach as well. Having one person that does all of your network related work and your security management, you should always have a good backup, and you should also have it audited at least on an annual basis.
Agreed.
Cross training. This is actually going to be a little different for directional cross training. Typically, when I speak on business continuity planning, cross training has to do with making sure that if somebody's out sick for 2 weeks, that the job gets done. This actually is a little more of an audit feature. You should have all of your employees cross trained so you can do a little mix up the fruit basket a little bit. Make one employee work another person's desk for 2 weeks. Anything that's going on that is not appropriate or against policy or not what you expected that employee to be doing is probably going to surface in that 2 weeks.
So the other employee doing that job would notice that the other employee is not doing what they're supposed to.
That is correct.
Okay, well, this is going to kind of tie it up for us right now. Just a couple of things I want to mention before we kind of close it out I think are very important. First, I want to thank everybody for coming, but in the process of everything we talked about today, we talked about a lot of protections and stuff like that. And one of the things that didn't really fit anywhere I want to talk about was what you can do as far as insurance is concerned. There are a lot of insurance companies out there now that are selling cyber liability insurance. This is the insurance that will allow you, obviously we don't sell it, but it will allow you to be protected should one of your employees do something with technology that they shouldn't, create a breach in a compliant environment, accidentally disclose confidential information, not properly destroy data. Any of the things that could cause a risk or a reporting incident or anything that would be considered a cyber liability will fall under that. If you're a technology company in general and you're working with some technology specific, you may also want to include an errors and omissions in that to make sure that you're covering your company from an insurance standpoint. Like I said, that didn't really fit anywhere, but we did want to talk about it because that defense in depth not only is about what you're doing security-wise, but it's also what you're doing business-wise, and that's a business step we think you all should take. Before we wrap up today, though, I want to make sure that anybody that wants to make sure they're in the drawing for the Starbucks gift card that we will be giving away, please make sure you put your email address in the question box. You will have to do that for us to be able to see who's here for the drawing. This is Joining Anonymous. We really don't know everybody that's on. You could have joined without putting in information. So if you would do that, we'd greatly appreciate it. And then lastly, as with anything, we would love to help you with any of these issues that we've talked about today, to sit down and spend more time going over it in depth, answering questions for you, or even looking at your environment and helping you make other decisions. You can feel free to contact us at any time. Reach out to anyone here, and we would be happy to set up an appointment. But that wraps it up. Mick, you want to say anything?
Thank you very much. I enjoyed it, our time, Doug.
Excellent. Thank you. I enjoyed it as well, and I look forward to seeing you guys on the next webinar. Thank you.